The marking comes quietly at first. Perhaps it begins with an invitation to a workers' guild that promises better conditions, or a philosophical discussion group that meets in the lower hab blocks of a hive city. Maybe it starts with a charity organisation that actually seems to care about the underhive poor, or a religious sect that offers interpretations of the imperial creed slightly different from the standard ecclesiarchy liturgies. The descent into chaos rarely announces itself with demon princes and warp storms. Instead, it creeps in through the cracks of imperial society, disguised as hope, community, or simply an answer to suffering that the Imperium has long since stopped trying to alleviate. The first meetings seem innocuous enough. The members are friendly, welcoming in a way that few imperial institutions ever are. They speak of brotherhood, of mutual support, of old traditions that predate the current orthodoxy. They offer tangible help, food for hungry families, protection from the local gangs, medical supplies that the Adeptus Mechanicus charges exorbitant fees to provide. For someone living in the crushing poverty of a hive world, or enduring the brutal conditions of a manufactorum, or simply existing in one of the countless imperial worlds where life is measured in its capacity to serve rather than its inherent value, such organizations seem like miracles. The cultists do not immediately reveal their true nature. This is survival necessity, in an imperium where chaos worship represents the highest form of heresy, punishable by death at minimum, and often by fates considerably worse. The Ordo Hereticus, the witch hunters of the Inquisition, maintain constant vigilance against exactly this sort of corruption. Local Adeptus Arbit's forces investigate suspicious gatherings. Planetary governors maintain informant networks. Even neighbours watch neighbours, encouraged by centuries of propaganda to report any deviation from acceptable behaviour. A chaos cult that openly proclaimed its allegiance would be purged within days, its members executed, their families investigated, their acquaintances interrogated. So the cult hides behind legitimate fronts, building slowly, recruiting carefully. They target the desperate first, those with nothing left to lose. The hab worker whose child died because they could not afford proper medical care. The former guardsman returned from war only to find no employment and less sympathy. The mutant hiding their deformities beneath heavy clothing, knowing that discovery means death. These are the fertile ground in which chaos takes root. The cultists offer what the Imperium never has, genuine compassion, or at least the convincing appearance of it. They listen to grievances, they validate suffering, they suggest ever so gently that perhaps the current order is not as just as the preachers claim. The indoctrination proceeds in stages, each one carefully designed to normalize what would have seemed impossible at the beginning. First comes the critique of imperial authority. Not open rebellion, not yet, but questions. Why does the administratum demand such heavy tithes while nobles live in luxury? Why must so many die in the guard while high lords grow fat behind fortress walls? Why does the emperor, who supposedly loves humanity, permit such suffering among his faithful? These are dangerous thoughts, but not yet heretical. Many loyal imperial citizens harbour similar doubts, though they keep them silent. Next comes the alternative history, the forbidden knowledge. The cultists claim to possess ancient texts, pre-heresy documents, or recovered data slates that tell a different story than official imperial history. They speak of the emperor as a tyrant who conquered terror through violence, who created the Primarchs as weapons rather than sons, who betrayed those who served him most faithfully. They present Horus not as the ultimate traitor, but as a hero who saw the truth and tried to free humanity from authoritarian oppression. This narrative, carefully constructed and presented with apparent evidence, plants seeds of doubt about everything the recruit has been taught. The spiritual corruption begins subtly, woven into the questioning of imperial authority. Perhaps the cult introduces meditation practices that they claim derive from pre-imperial terror, techniques for finding inner peace or unlocking hidden potential. These practices, never identified as what they truly are, begin to open the practitioner's mind to the warp. Or the cult might encourage the study of forbidden philosophies, texts that discuss the nature of belief and reality in ways that the ecclesiarchy condemns. The language used carefully avoids mentioning chaos directly. The four powers might be referred to as aspects of human nature, primal forces that the Imperium wrongly demonizes, or even as misunderstood gods who offer genuine power to their followers. By the time the cult reveals its true nature, the recruit is already compromised. They have participated in forbidden gatherings, read heretical texts, spoken against the Emperor's righteousness. They have formed bonds with fellow cultists, relationships that feel more genuine than anything they experienced in legitimate imperial society. They have tasted the first hints of power that chaos offers, whether through psychic awakening, physical enhancement, or simply the intoxication of forbidden knowledge. Backing out now means facing not just loss of community, but potentially execution if anyone reports their involvement. The cult has created a trap, and most who enter it never escape. The actual marking, when it comes, represents the final commitment. Different cults employ different methods, all designed to forge an unbreakable bond between the recruit and the chaos power the cult serves. For Khornate cults, the marking might involve participation in ritual combat, the spilling of blood in the blood god's name, the killing of an innocent, or the defeat of a warrior in single combat. The first kill in Khorne's service often produces a visceral change in the killer, a rush of savage joy that feels simultaneously horrifying and exhilarating. The blood cult member finds violence becoming easier, almost pleasurable, their capacity for mercy eroding as the blood god's influence seeps into their psyche. Nurglite cults mark their members through exposure to disease, ritual infection with plagues brewed in hidden laboratories, or summoned through warp-tainted rituals. The initiate drinks from the fouled cup, consumes the contaminated host, or willingly allows themselves to be bitten by plague-riddled vermin. The sickness that follows is not simply physical. As their body corrupts, as flesh rots and organs fail, only to somehow continue functioning, the Marked One begins to perceive the world differently. Pain fades, replaced by a strange contentment. The fear of death evaporates, replaced by acceptance or even gratitude. Grandfather Nurgle's touch brings not just disease but a twisted form of peace, the end of striving and worry, the embrace of inevitable decay. Tzeentchian cults mark their members through forbidden knowledge, forcing them to witness truths that shatter mortal comprehension. The initiate might be shown a grimoire containing actual warpcraft, forced to read words that burn themselves into the mind and can never be forgotten. Or they might participate in a ritual that grants them glimpses into the future, visions of possibility and change that reveal how malleable reality truly is. The Architect of Fate marks his followers not with obvious deformity but with obsession. The Tzeentchian cultist becomes consumed with schemes and plots, their mind racing through endless permutations of how events might unfold, unable to simply exist in the present moment. Slaaneshi cults employ the most seductive marking rituals, offering experiences that push beyond the boundaries of acceptable sensation. The initiate might participate in elaborate ceremonies involving forbidden pleasures, experiences so intense that normal life afterward seems grey and lifeless by comparison. Or they might consume substances that open channels in the mind and body to sensations that should not be possible, pleasures and pains so extreme they blur together into a single overwhelming experience. The Prince of Pleasure marks his followers with insatiable hunger, an endless craving for sensation that can never be fully satisfied. Each experience must be more extreme than the last, pushing further into excess until the cultist's entire existence revolves around the pursuit of stimulation. The physical changes begin immediately after marking, though they start small enough to conceal. A Khornate cultist might notice their muscles becoming slightly more defined, their reflexes improving, a newfound tolerance for pain. A Nurglite begins to notice patches of discoloured skin, a persistent cough, symptoms that seem serious but somehow never quite kill them. The Tzeentchian's eyes might take on an unusual glint, reflecting light strangely, or they might discover small marks appearing on their skin that resemble sigils from the forbidden texts they have studied. The Slaaneshi cultist finds themselves becoming more attractive in some indefinable way, their movements more graceful, their voice more compelling, even as something fundamentally wrong begins to show in their bearing. These initial changes can be hidden beneath clothing, explained away as natural variation or minor ailments. The cult teaches concealment techniques, ways to appear normal to casual observation. Baggy garments hide skin discoloration and unusual growths. Hoods and scarves obscure facial changes. The marked learn to move carefully, avoiding situations where close examination might reveal their corruption. They continue their normal lives on the surface, maintaining jobs and relationships, all while serving the cult's agenda in secret. This double existence creates psychological strain, a constant awareness that discovery means death, but the cult provides community and purpose, that make the risk seem worthwhile. The mental changes progress faster than the physical ones. The marked cultist finds their thoughts turning increasingly to their patron god, their worldview reshaping itself to align with that entity's nature. Corneties become irritable and aggressive, finding themselves fantasizing about violence, feeling restless without conflict. Nurglites grow lethargic yet somehow content, accepting suffering with disturbing serenity, feeling affection for their diseases. Tzeentchians become paranoid and scheming, unable to trust anything at face value, constantly seeking hidden meanings and plotting complex strategies. Slaaneshi cultists grow hedonistic and sensation-seeking, finding normal experiences increasingly dull, requiring ever greater stimulation to feel anything at all. Friends and family notice the changes, though they may not understand what they're witnessing. The marked one becomes distant, secretive about their activities and associations. They seem distracted, as if listening to voices others cannot hear. Their personality shifts in subtle but disturbing ways. A formerly gentle person becomes prone to outbursts of rage. Someone once fastidious about hygiene grows careless about their appearance. A simple, straightforward individual suddenly speaks in riddles and seems obsessed with conspiracies. A modest, reserved person becomes inappropriately forward, their behavior crossing boundaries they once respected. Most loved ones rationalize these changes. The marked one is under stress from work. They have fallen in with a bad crowd. They need rest or medical attention or simply time to work through whatever troubles them. The possibility of chaos corruption seems too terrible to contemplate, too impossible to credit. This denial allows the corruption to progress further than it otherwise might. By the time family members seriously consider the possibility that something fundamentally wrong is happening, the marked one is often too far gone to save, too committed to the cult and its promises to accept intervention. The cult itself grows bolder as its numbers increase and its members become more corrupted. What began as quiet meetings in hidden locations expands into more overt activity. The cultists begin marking territory with subtle signs, symbols painted in out-of-the-way locations that other cultists recognize but normal citizens ignore or do not understand. They start proselytizing more aggressively, seeking new recruits among those they have identified as susceptible. Some cults establish legitimate businesses or charitable organizations as fronts, using them to spread influence and identify potential converts. Others infiltrate existing imperial institutions, placing cultists in positions of minor authority where they can shield the cult from investigation. The marked cultists perform rituals with increasing frequency and ambition. Small ceremonies conducted in secret grow into elaborate rites requiring multiple participants and significant preparation. The cult acquires forbidden materials, smuggled warp-tainted artifacts, stolen components for summoning circles, captured victims for sacrifice. These rituals serve multiple purposes. They strengthen the connection between the cultists and their patron god, drawing more warp energy into the material realm. They advance the cult's goals, whether through divination, the creation of possessed objects, or the summoning of minor demons, and they deepen each cultist's commitment, forcing them to participate in acts so heinous that return to imperial society becomes psychologically impossible. The mutations accelerate as the cultist continues their worship, and the warp's influence on their flesh intensifies. What began as minor discolorations and small growths develops into undeniable deformity. Horns push through the skull, extra limbs sprout from torsos, skin hardens into scales or sloughs away to reveal pulsing organs beneath. Eyes multiply or change colour in ways that no longer seem even remotely human. The mutations reflect the nature of the patron god. Cornates develop brass-coloured skin, skull-like faces, bladed protrusions from bones. Nurglites rot and bloat, their flesh becoming home to parasites and diseases, leaking fluids that should mean death but somehow sustain a horrible life. Tzeentchians experience reality warping changes, limbs that shift position, skin that displays images from other times and places, growths that defy anatomical possibility. Slaaneshi cultists become beautiful and terrible simultaneously, their forms perfected in some ways while growing grotesque extra features designed to enhance sensation. Concealing these advanced mutations becomes impossible. The marked one can no longer venture into normal imperial society without immediately drawing attention. They must retreat fully into the cult's hidden spaces, living in the underhive or the waste zones outside cities, in abandoned industrial complexes or forgotten sections of starships, anywhere the Imperium's gaze does not penetrate. This isolation accelerates the corruption. Surrounded only by other cultists, with no contact with normal humanity, the marked lose their remaining connection to their former lives. They embrace their mutations as gifts from their god, rather than the horrific transformations they truly are. Some even welcome further changes, praying for more dramatic alterations that will mark them as favoured by their patron. The cult at this stage faces a critical juncture. It has grown too large and too corrupt to remain completely hidden, but not yet powerful enough to openly challenge imperial authority. Discovery becomes increasingly likely as the cultists' activities leave more evidence. Mutilated bodies turn up in hab blocks. Citizens disappear with suspicious frequency near cult territories. The strange symbols marked throughout the underhive begin appearing in more visible locations. Local arbits start investigating. Concerned citizens file reports. The Inquisition receives word of unusual activity and dispatches agents to investigate. The cult's response to this pressure determines its fate. Some attempt to go deeper into hiding, purging members who have become too obviously mutated, eliminating witnesses, covering their tracks more carefully. This strategy sometimes succeeds in buying more time, allowing the cult to continue growing in secret. But it also creates internal tensions. The marked ones who are cast out or executed for being too visible feel betrayed. Those who escape the purge resent the leadership's willingness to sacrifice followers. The cult fractures, with splinter groups forming and sometimes betraying the main organization to authorities, hoping to curry favor or simply out of spite. Other cults choose acceleration, deciding that if discovery is inevitable, they should summon their patron's full power before the Imperium can destroy them. They launch a desperate campaign of ritual murder and demonic summoning, sacrificing dozens or hundreds of victims in massive ceremonies designed to tear open the veil between the material realm and the warp. If successful, these rituals create lasting warp rifts, portals through which demons can pour into reality. The entire region around the cult stronghold becomes tainted, warp energy seeping into the physical world, reality itself becoming unstable. This represents catastrophic success for the cult and catastrophic failure for the local imperial authorities. Most commonly, the cult is discovered before it can choose its own fate. The Inquisition's investigation uncovers the full extent of the corruption. Arbit's forces raid suspected cult locations, capturing cultists and seizing evidence. The governor mobilizes PDF forces if the threat is large enough. In extreme cases, Space Marine chapters respond to calls for assistance. The purge, when it comes, is brutal and comprehensive. The Imperium makes no distinction between willing cultists and those who are deceived or coerced. All who bear the mark of chaos must die. All who associated with them must be interrogated. All locations they frequented must be cleansed with fire. The marked cultists face 3 possible fates when the purge begins. Some fight, throwing themselves at Imperial forces with fanatical fury. Cornets welcome the chance for glorious battle, charging forward with improvised weapons or stolen armaments, howling praises to the blood god as they die. Their mutations often make them formidable opponents despite lacking proper military training. Enhanced strength allows them to tear through basic armor. Increased pain tolerance keeps them fighting through wounds that would drop a normal human. The presence of the warp in their flesh sometimes grants supernatural resilience, bullets passing through corrupted tissue without causing fatal damage. But numbers and discipline eventually overcome even chaos-enhanced ferocity. The Imperium has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of purging heretics, and cultist uprisings rarely succeed against properly deployed military force. Nurglites shamble forward with disturbing serenity, spreading plague among their enemies even as bolter fire tears through their rotting bodies. Their very presence becomes a weapon, the diseases they carry infecting anyone who comes too close. Guardsmen who engage Nurglite cultists in close combat often contract hideous infections, their flesh necrotizing within hours, organs failing as unnatural plagues consume them from within. This forces Imperial forces to adopt scorched earth tactics, using flamers and incendiary weapons to burn the cultists from a distance, ensuring their corrupted flesh cannot spread contagion. The Nurglites laugh as they burn, accepting immolation as just another gift from Grandfather Nurgle, their charred corpses continuing to twitch and moan even as flames reduce them to ash. Tzeentchians attempt to use their acquired sorcery, hurling warp fire or summoning minor demons to defend themselves. Those who have progressed far enough in their studies of the forbidden arts can prove genuinely dangerous, warping reality around them, turning imperial weapons against their wielders, or opening small rifts to unleash horrors from the immaterium. But most cultist sorcerers are amateurs, dabbling in powers they barely comprehend. Their spells backfire as often as they succeed, consuming the caster in multicoloured flames, or opening portals that pull them into the warp rather than bringing demons forth. The few who demonstrate real proficiency become priority targets for inquisitorial kill teams, eliminated with extreme prejudice before they can cause catastrophic damage. Slaaneshi cultists often attempt to seduce or confuse their attackers, using their enhanced charisma and reality-bending presence to make pursuers hesitate or turn against each other. They speak in voices that seem to promise forbidden pleasures, display forms that mesmerize even as they horrify, move with hypnotic grace that makes aiming at them strangely difficult. Against undisciplined troops, these tactics sometimes succeed in sowing confusion and buying time for escape. But Imperial forces trained specifically for purging chaos threats know better than to look directly at Slaaneshi cultists, to listen to their honeyed words, or to hesitate in pulling the trigger. Flamers work particularly well against the Prince of Pleasure's followers, denying them the opportunity to employ their seductive powers and reducing their carefully cultivated forms to blackened meat. Others attempt to flee, abandoning the cult's stronghold and trying to lose themselves in the vastness of the Hive City, or disappear into the wilderness beyond civilized zones. This rarely succeeds. The Imperium's response to discovered chaos cults is comprehensive. Arbits establish cordons around suspected areas, preventing escape. Servo skulls equipped with augers scan for signs of mutation or warp taint. Psykers attached to purge forces sense the spiritual corruption that marks anyone who has truly embraced chaos. Dogs and other animals trained to detect the distinctive scent of rot, blood, or unnatural pheromones that cultists emit, track fleeing heretics through even the most confusing urban environments. Those few who do manage to escape the initial purge find themselves hunted for years afterward, never truly safe, always looking over their shoulders, knowing that the Inquisition never forgets and never forgives. The third group surrenders, falling to their knees and begging for mercy, claiming they were deceived or coerced, swearing renewed loyalty to the Emperor. The Imperium accepts these surrenders, but extends no mercy. Every cultist is guilty. Every marked one is corrupted beyond redemption. The depth of their involvement matters only for determining which form of execution they receive and how extensively their associates must be investigated. Those who claim innocence face the most intense interrogation, for the Inquisition must determine how deeply the corruption has spread, who else might be tainted, what the cult accomplished before discovery. The interrogation methods employed by the Inquisition defy conventional ethics. The Inquisitor and their agents understand that conventional torture produces unreliable results, that subjects will say anything to end pain. But they also possess tools and techniques that go far beyond physical suffering. Psychic interrogation allows a psyker to literally examine the subject's memories, rifling through their thoughts like pages in a book. The process is agonizing and almost always leaves the subject brain damaged, but it produces accurate information about the cult's activities, membership and goals. Those subjected to psychic interrogation rarely remain sane enough afterward to face trial. Many are reduced to drooling vegetables, kept alive only until the information they provided can be verified, then quietly terminated. For those insufficiently psychic to probe mentally, the Inquisition employs chemical interrogation, injecting the subject with various substances that lower inhibitions, break down willpower, and make lying physiologically difficult. Some of these drugs are derived from obscure Xenos sources. Others represent the product of Adeptus Mechanicus research into neurological manipulation. The chemicals produce side effects ranging from temporary psychosis to permanent organ damage, but the Inquisition considers this acceptable, given that the subjects are already condemned. Truth serums prove remarkably effective at extracting confessions and detailed accounts of cult activities, though the information must still be cross-referenced with other sources since even truth serum cannot completely prevent self-deception or mistaken beliefs. Physical torture remains part of the interrogation arsenal, not because it produces reliable confessions, but because it breaks the subject's will, making them more susceptible to other techniques. The Inquisition's torturers are skilled professionals who understand human anatomy in disturbing detail. They know precisely how much pain a body can endure before shock sets in. They understand which injuries cause maximum suffering while keeping the subject conscious and capable of answering questions. They employ devices ranging from simple implements like brands and knives to sophisticated machines that systematically destroy the body while keeping vital organs functioning. The goal is not primarily to inflict suffering, though the Inquisition feels no sympathy for heretics, but to ensure that the subject provides all useful information before their execution. The trials, when they occur, are formalities. The verdict is predetermined. Every cultist dies. The only questions are how much information they provide first, and whether their deaths serve additional purposes beyond simple execution. Some are made examples, publicly executed in elaborate ceremonies designed to reinforce loyalty among the broader population and demonstrate the Imperium's power over chaos corruption. These executions might involve burning at the stake, a traditional method that purifies through fire while allowing the condemned to publicly recant their heresies. Or they might employ more theatrical methods, subjecting the cultist to creative torments that symbolically reverse their corruptions, skinning those marked by Slanesh, drowning those corrupted by Nurgle, beheading the servants of Khorne, burning the followers of Tzeentch. Others are disposed of more quietly, executed en masse in processing centres designed for efficient elimination of large numbers of heretics. These facilities, operated jointly by the Arbites and the Inquisition, function like abattoirs for human souls. The condemned are herded through standardized procedures that end in various forms of death. Firing squads execute those whose crimes merit military-style punishment. Others face hanging, quick deaths that serve administrative efficiency rather than dramatic purpose. Some are simply shot in the back of the head and their bodies dumped into mass graves or incinerators. The Imperium processes thousands of executed heretics with bureaucratic detachment, their deaths reduced to entries in ledgers and requisitions for additional ammunition. A few cultists are designated for more specialized fates. Those who display useful skills or knowledge might be offered servitor conversion as an alternative to immediate execution. This is not mercy. Servitorization involves removing most of the subject's brain, replacing it with mechanical components that allow for programmed responses but eliminate all personality, free will, and memory. The resulting servitor retains the technical skills or physical capabilities that made the original person useful while completely erasing the corruption that made them heretical. From the Imperium's perspective, this represents efficient resource utilization. The heretic is punished through the destruction of their identity while their body continues serving the Emperor in a purified form. The most dangerous cultists, those who demonstrated powerful psychic abilities or possessed extensive knowledge of chaos rituals, face a worse fate than simple execution. The Inquisition maintains secure facilities where such prisoners are kept indefinitely, subjected to continuous interrogation and study. These heretics provide valuable intelligence about chaos worship, allowing inquisitors to better understand the tactics and theology of different cult types. They serve as test subjects for anti-chaos techniques, helping researchers develop better methods for detecting and combating corruption. And they suffer endlessly, their existence prolonged through medical intervention, specifically to maximize the duration of their punishment. Some remain in these facilities for decades, their bodies and minds destroyed by continuous torture and interrogation, kept alive through augmetics and chemical stimulants, experiencing more suffering than seems possible for a human to endure. The families and associates of cultists face investigation regardless of their own innocence or guilt. The Inquisition operates on the principle that corruption spreads through social contact. Anyone who regularly interacted with a cultist might be tainted, either through deliberate recruitment attempts or through passive exposure to warp energies. Spouses, children, parents, friends, co-workers, neighbours all face interrogation about their knowledge of the cultists' activities. Most prove clean, ignorant of the heresy occurring in their midst, but the investigation itself destroys lives. Those cleared of suspicion still carry the stain of association with heresy. Employers refuse to hire them, neighbours shun them. The ecclesiarchy marks them as spiritually suspect, requiring extensive penance and purification rituals before allowing them to participate in normal religious observances. Some family members choose a different path when they learn of their loved one's corruption. Driven by shame and desperate to prove their own loyalty, they inform on the cultists themselves, sometimes even participating in the purge that destroys the cult. The Imperium rewards such loyalty, though it views it with some cynicism. After all, the informant failed to notice the corruption earlier, suggesting either incompetence or willful blindness. Still, those who turn in their corrupted relatives typically avoid the harshest scrutiny, their betrayal of familial bonds serving as evidence of proper imperial devotion. Some even receive commendations or rewards, though they must live with the knowledge that they sent someone they once loved to torture and execution. The locations where cults operated face comprehensive purification. Buildings are demolished or burned, underground spaces are collapsed or sealed. The ecclesiarchy performs extensive cleansing rituals, blessing every surface that might have been touched by heretical activities. Psychers examine the area for lingering warp taint, burning away any spiritual corruption that remains after the physical purge. In extreme cases, entire city districts are abandoned and sealed off, declared forbidden zones where no loyal imperial citizen may venture. These measures seem excessive to outsiders, but the Imperium understands that chaos corruption can persist in physical locations. Sites where extensive rituals occurred remain tainted, the boundary between the material realm and the warp worn thin by repeated violations. Failing to properly cleanse these areas risks future cults, arising in the same locations, drawn to the existing weakness in reality's fabric. The purge extends beyond the cult itself to encompass anyone who might have been exposed to their influence. Literacy programs the cult ran attract investigation. Charitable food distributions they organized lead to questioning everyone who received assistance. Businesses they patronized face audits. The Inquisition operates on the principle that it is better to investigate 10,000 innocents than to allow a single heretic to escape. This approach generates vast amounts of work and causes tremendous disruption to normal society. But the alternative is deemed too dangerous. Chaos corruption, left unchecked, can consume entire worlds. Better to endure the inconvenience and injustice of overzealous investigation than risk a genuine threat going undetected. Some cultists manage to survive the purge not through escape but through evolution. As the Imperium's forces close in, as death becomes inevitable, some marked ones experience final transformations that either save or damn them depending on perspective. The accumulated mutations, the warp energies saturating their corrupted flesh, the desperate prayers to their patron gods, all combine to trigger a metamorphosis. These transformations take two primary forms, each representing a different outcome of the path that began with that first invitation to join what seemed like a harmless association. The fortunate, if that word can apply to chaos worshippers, ascend to become full demon hosts. Their mortal flesh becomes a vessel for a denizen of the warp. Their consciousness subsumed or merged with the demonic entity that now inhabits their body. The transformation grants enormous power. The newly possessed cultist displays supernatural strength, resilience, and abilities that defy natural law. They can channel warp energies, reshape reality around them, and survive injuries that would instantly kill a normal human. But the price is the complete loss of human identity. The person who first joined the cult, who made that initial choice to accept the marking, no longer exists in any meaningful sense. They have become a puppet for an entity from beyond reality, their body nothing more than meat shaped into a form convenient for the demon's purposes. The unlucky, which is to say the vast majority, devolve into chaos spawn. This represents the ultimate failure state of chaos worship, the fate that awaits those who accumulate too many mutations or receive too much of their god's attention without possessing the strength to contain it. The transformation into a spawn is agonizing and irreversible. The cultist's body undergoes catastrophic change, flesh flowing like wax, bones bending and multiplying, organs duplicating or fusing or simply vanishing. Limbs sprout randomly from the torso, faces appear in unexpected locations. The body expands or contracts without regard for anatomical possibility, becoming a mass of contradictory features that shouldn't be able to function, yet somehow does. Worse than the physical transformation is the mental obliteration. The chaos spawn retains no trace of its former intelligence or personality. All memories are gone. All capacity for thought beyond basic animal responses is erased. The spawn exists in a state of perpetual confusion and rage, driven by instincts it cannot understand, capable of basic responses to threats, but incapable of planning, communication, or self-awareness. This represents the darkest joke of chaos worship. Those who sought power and transcendence through service to the dark gods end up as mindless monsters, their ambitions destroyed, their selves annihilated, their bodies reduced to weapons wielded by beings who feel nothing but contempt for their weakness. The chaos spawn created during a cult purge serve as obstacles for Imperial forces, absorbing fire and attention, while more valuable cultists attempt to escape or complete final rituals. The spawn shamble forward or charge with animal aggression, attacking anything that moves, too stupid to distinguish friend from foe. Their mutated bodies are resilient, regenerating from wounds, functioning despite injuries that should be fatal. Destroying a spawn typically requires sustained firepower or specialized weaponry. Flamers work well, burning away the constantly regenerating flesh faster than it can restore itself. Melter weapons vaporize entire sections of the creature, removing mass that cannot regenerate. Power weapons cut through the unnatural tissue, though even decapitation doesn't always stop a spawn if its physiology has diverged too far from anything resembling a normal organism. Those Imperial soldiers who encounter Chaos spawn in battle find the experience psychologically scarring. There is something fundamentally wrong about these creatures, something that offends human perception at a deep level. Looking directly at a spawn causes nausea and disorientation. The brain struggles to process the contradictory anatomy, the impossible movements, the sheer wrongness of what it is seeing. Soldiers who survive encounters with spawn often require psychological counseling and spiritual purification, nightmares of the creature's forms haunting them for years afterward. The ecclesiarchy provides special prayers and rituals for those afflicted, though some never fully recover their mental equilibrium. After the purge ends, after the last cultist is executed and the last spawn burned, the Inquisition conducts extensive follow-up investigations. They examine why the cult was able to form and grow undetected. They identify systemic failures in planetary governance, law enforcement, or religious instruction that allowed heresy to take root. They interview thousands of citizens to map the cult's full extent and identify any overlooked members or sympathizers. This process can take months or years, during which the entire planet remains under heightened scrutiny. Inquisitorial agents maintain a presence, watching for any signs of resurgent corruption, ready to respond instantly if new cultist activity appears. The long-term consequences of a discovered cult extend far beyond the immediate purge. Entire industries collapse if too many workers were involved with the cult. Trade relationships falter as other worlds hesitate to deal with a planet tainted by chaos. The local government faces potential replacement if the governor is deemed culpable for failing to prevent the cult's formation. The ecclesiarchy intensifies its presence, flooding the world with preachers who deliver endless sermons about the dangers of heresy and the necessity of vigilance. Mandatory prayer sessions become more frequent. Public displays of piety become expected. The entire planet's culture shifts toward paranoia and religious extremism, the Imperium using fear of chaos to enforce tighter social control. Some cultists escape both death and transformation through means that seem impossible yet occur with disturbing regularity. They flee off-world before the purge begins, stowing away on merchant vessels or convincing unscrupulous ship captains to transport them despite their obvious mutations. They disappear into the Underhive so completely that even extensive searches fail to locate them, surviving in forgotten corners of the city where the Imperium's authority barely reaches. They are smuggled to other worlds by fellow cultists who escape detection, networks of hidden heretics moving their compromised members to safety before they can be interrogated and reveal the broader conspiracy. These survivors face an existence defined by constant fear and gradual degradation. They can never return to normal Imperial society. Their mutations mark them as heretics to anyone who sees them clearly. They must hide constantly, living in shadows, venturing into public only when absolutely necessary and then heavily disguised. The corruption in their flesh continues to progress. Without access to the cult's rituals and the regular infusions of warp energy those ceremonies provided, the mutations become more random and less controllable. The Marked One might wake one day to find new appendages sprouting from their body, their skins sloughing away, their bones warping into new configurations. Each change brings them closer to the threshold beyond which they will devolve into a chaos spawn, that final transformation that ends all agency and awareness. Some escaped cultists seek to form new cults, spreading their corruption to new populations, beginning the cycle again in a different location. They tell themselves they are servants of their god, spreading the true faith, liberating others from the false teachings of the imperial creed. In truth, they are vectors of a spiritual disease, damning everyone they touch, creating new victims who will eventually face the same terrible fate. The Inquisition tracks these wandering heretics when possible, following trails of suspicious activity and warped taint across multiple worlds. Most are eventually caught, their new cults discovered and purged just like the ones they escaped from, though sometimes years or decades pass before the Inquisition closes the case. Others become mercenaries in the service of Chaos Space Marines or other forces aligned with the ruinous powers. A marked cultist with useful skills might be recruited by a warband, their mutations seen as assets rather than deformities, their corruption making them trustworthy in ways normal humans could never be. These cultists serve as scouts, saboteurs, or cannon fodder in the endless wars the traitor legions wage against the Imperium. They gain some protection and purpose, belonging to an organization with power and resources, but they remain expendable. The Space Marines view mortal cultists as tools to be used and discarded. When a mission requires someone to trigger a trap, to test defenses, or to simply absorb enemy fire, the marked cultist is volunteered regardless of their preferences. The absolute worst outcome, rare but not unheard of, involves the marked cultist maintaining their humanity and awareness despite extensive corruption. These unfortunates remain mentally intact even as their bodies transform into grotesque parodies of human form. They can think, feel, remember who they were, and what they have become. But they cannot undo the changes. The mutations progress regardless of their wishes. They experience every transformation, feeling their flesh reshaping itself, enduring the pain of bones breaking and reforming, watching helplessly as their hands become claws, or their face elongates into a bestial muzzle. Some retain enough dexterity to write or record their experiences, leaving behind accounts that serve as warnings about the true cost of chaos worship. These chronicles, when discovered by the Inquisition, are immediately classified and suppressed. The detailed descriptions of transformation, the first-person accounts of corruption's progress, represent dangerous knowledge. Reading such texts exposes the reader to ideas and imagery that can themselves plant seeds of corruption. Yet the Inquisition preserves these documents in secure archives, recognizing their value for understanding how chaos corruption operates at the individual level. Inquisitors studying heretical movements consult these accounts, using them to better predict cultist behavior and identify early warning signs of corruption in populations under investigation. The question of redemption haunts any discussion of chaos corruption. Can someone who has been marked by a chaos cult ever truly return to the Emperor's grace? The Imperium's official position is absolute. Once marked, always damned. The taint runs too deep to excise. Even if the cultist genuinely repents, even if they turn on their former comrades and beg for forgiveness, the corruption in their flesh and spirit cannot be cleansed by any means the Imperium possesses. Execution remains the only acceptable solution, though the Emperor may show mercy to the cultist's soul after death, accepting their repentance in the afterlife, even though their mortal form must be destroyed. Yet stories persist of exceptions, whispered accounts that circulate despite official denials. A marked cultist who threw themselves on the mercy of a particularly powerful saint and was miraculously restored to human form, their mutations burned away by the saint's divine radiance. An inquisitor who captured a cultist and subjected them to such intensive psychic cleansing that the chaos taint was forcibly expelled from their spirit, though the process left them barely alive and permanently brain damaged. A Space Marine chaplain who performed an exorcism on a possessed cultist that successfully drove out the demon while leaving the host intact, though forever changed by the experience. These stories are rarely verified and often dismissed as propaganda or myth, but they serve a purpose regardless of their truth. They suggest that even in the darkest circumstances, even after making the worst possible choices, redemption remains theoretically possible. This offers hope to those struggling against chaos corruption in its early stages, encouraging them to resist rather than surrender to inevitability. It also provides justification for the Imperium's otherwise inexplicable policy of investigating every cultist, rather than simply killing them immediately. If even 1 in a million might be saved, if exceptional circumstances might allow for cleansing, then the investigations and interrogations serve a purpose beyond simply extracting tactical information. The reality is almost certainly darker than the myths suggest. The few documented cases of cultists being restored to Imperial service involve such extensive mental and physical reconstruction that the resulting individual bears little resemblance to who they were before corruption. They might technically be alive and no longer tainted by chaos, but they are essentially different people. Their memories suppressed or erased, their personalities rebuilt from scratch, their bodies augmented with so many mechanical components that calling them human requires stretching the definition. These reconstructed former cultists serve the Inquisition as tools, deployed in situations where someone with knowledge of chaos is needed, but a normal agent would be too susceptible to corruption. Their existence is not liberation, but merely transformation from one form of enslavement to another. The marked cultist's story, regardless of how it ends, serves as a warning about the seductive nature of chaos and the terrible price of seeking power or meaning outside the Emperor's grace. It begins with understandable desperation, the desire to escape suffering or find community in an imperium that offers neither. It progresses through stages that seem almost reasonable at each step, the slow acceptance of ideas that once seemed unthinkable, the gradual compromise of principles that once seemed inviolable, and it ends in horror, death, or transformation into something that can no longer be called human. Every step of the way, the cultist makes choices, but each choice narrows the range of available options, until eventually no choice remains except how to face the inevitable end. The Imperium uses these stories, the testimony of repentant cultists recorded before execution, the accounts of those who resisted cult recruitment, the evidence gathered from purged cult sites, to fuel its propaganda campaigns. Endless sermons describe in graphic detail what happens to heretics. Public service announcements broadcast the signs of cult activity and encourage citizens to report suspicious behavior. Children are taught from their earliest years that chaos represents absolute evil, that even entertaining heretical thoughts invites damnation. This indoctrination proves largely effective. Most Imperial citizens genuinely fear chaos and would report cult activity if they encountered it. The social pressure against heresy remains intense, making cult recruitment difficult and dangerous. Yet cults continue to form regardless. In a galaxy as vast as the Imperium, containing countless worlds with populations numbering in the billions, statistical inevitability ensures that corruption will always find new victims. The crushing poverty, the endless war, the casual brutality of Imperial governance, all create desperate people seeking alternatives, and chaos stands ready to offer them what seems like salvation, to mark them with gifts that feel like blessings, to promise power and meaning and community. The cycle repeats endlessly. Cults form, grow, are discovered, and are purged. The marked go through their transformations, experience their degradation, and meet their ends. And somewhere, on some world the Imperium has never heard of, someone accepts an invitation to join a group that promises to make their life better, taking the first step on a path that leads inevitably to damnation. This is the brutal truth of what happens after being marked by a chaos cult. There is no good ending, no triumphant escape, no redemption that does not require the destruction of everything the marked one has become. The best outcome is a quick death before the corruption progresses too far. The worst is transformation into a chaos spawn, the obliteration of identity and consciousness, existence reduced to mindless flesh, animated by forces the former person can no longer comprehend. Between these extremes lie various forms of suffering, each one a testament to the fundamental wrongness of seeking salvation through the ruinous powers. The marked cultist's fate serves as both warning and proof that in the grim darkness of the far future, some choices cannot be unmade, some paths cannot be walked back, and some corruptions cannot be cleansed no matter how desperately one might wish otherwise.